Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Connecticut's Old State House and to our historic House of Representatives chamber. My name is Mariana Garcia, and I'm the Public Programs and Exhibits Manager here at the Old State House. I want to welcome you all. Thank you for being here in person, or if you are watching online, welcome as well. And this is our fourth and final installment in the 2024 Hartford History Lecture Series. For all those of you who have been here for all three of our lectures and even the walking tour, thank you so much. We're very happy with how the series went this year. We're very pleased, and I hope you really enjoyed all the lectures and learned lots. So today we have Dr. Christina Bleyer from Trinity College here to talk to us about the post-custodial archiving in Trinidad and Tobago, digitizing the Lloyd Best Archive. And as I said, this is our last program, but I hope you will join us again in 2025 for the next Hartford History Lecture Series. This is a collaboration between the Old State House and the Hartford Heritage Project at Connecticut State Community College Capitol and the History Department at UConn. And I would just like to really quickly thank our sponsors, the CT Humanities, who have very graciously funded this program this year in alignment with the 250th Commission of Connecticut. And now I would like to introduce Dr. Bleyer, who is College Librarian, Associate Vice President of Libraries and Digital Learning and Director of Special Collections and Archives at Watkinson Library at Trinity College in Hartford, Connecticut. She also serves as Editor-in-Chief of the Journal of Archival Organization. Her research is focused on human rights, ethics, and the role of emotions in the constitution of a person, the community, and memory, especially in Latin America and the Caribbean. In addition to securing several grants to collect oral histories from the Hartford community, Dr. Bleyer serves as the principal investigator for the Watkinson Library's recently awarded Modern Endangered Archives Program grant to digitize the Lloyd Best Archive in Trinidad and Tobago. In March of 2020, Dr. Bleyer was awarded an Andrew W. Mellon Rare Book School Fellowship for Diversity, Inclusion, and Cultural Heritage. And now I leave you with Dr. Bleyer. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mariana. It's a pleasure to be here with you all this evening. I'm here to talk with you all about the commitment that the Watkinson Library has made to Caribbean history and culture in and through our partnership with the Lloyd Best Institute of the Caribbean to digitize the Lloyd Best Archive. My only regret is that our partners in Trinidad and Tobago and my colleague at Trinity, Amanda Matava, could not be here to present this work with us today. Before I dive in, I'm going to just give kind of a little brief presentation, a brief overview of how this presentation will go. We're going to move from theory to practice, and then see how they're merged in the work that we are doing. To that end, I'll discuss our method for this project, which is post-custodial archiving, why it matters, and show you some examples of projects that have also taken this approach. Then I'll talk a little bit about Lloyd Best and his archive. I'll show you some photos, and as well as what we've digitized and described so far. I will also discuss how we are providing access to the archive and how we are preserving it for the long term. Before I get into post-custodial archiving, though, I want to read a poem by Peter Minshall, who is a renowned and very beloved Trinidadian artist and carnival costume designer. The poem is titled, "I Am a Caribbean." Who am I? I am not a European. I am not an African. I'm not an Indian. I'm not Chinese or Syrian. I'm not Amerindian. I'm not an American, North or South. I'm none of these. I'm all of these. I am a Caribbean. I'm a rare hybrid. I'm a richly textured, multi-layered creature. I am precious as a pearl. The world is my oyster. I see the world clearly from my island vantage. I do not harbor the vanities of a big city dweller or someone from a vast continent. I'm at the tip of the spear that leads into the future. I am a Caribbean. They say the Caribbean is a sea. Yes, I am an island in it. Much blood has spilled in that sea. All the waters of humanity wash my shores. I am a Caribbean. And again, that was by Peter Minshall from Trinidad and Tobago. The reason that I wanted to read this poem is because one of our hopes in doing this work is that while we cannot capture, no matter how much we digitize of Caribbean literature, politics, history, no matter how much we put out there, we can never capture what it means to be Caribbean. But by making the work of Lloyd Best accessible, we can point to what it means to be Caribbean, so that these ideas, and in particular Lloyd Best's idea of liberating the Caribbean imagination, so that these can come into dialogue with the current dominant discourse, and maybe start to break some things down and open us to new ideas. Okay, so let's see here. Hopefully I don't mess this. There we go. Okay, so I already did the overview. All right, so this is a big word, post-custodial praxis. What is it? Why does this matter? And what does that have to do with digitizing anything? So the method that we're using to digitize the Lloyd Best Archive in Trinidad and Tobago is called post-custodial archiving. Post-custodial archival praxis was born out of a critique of traditional archival practices coupled with the capacity that digital technology opens for archives. To understand what post-custodial archiving is and why it matters, it's necessary for me to give a very brief description of some of the traditional ways that archives have been collected, preserved, and made accessible. This is not exhaustive by any means. It can be argued that dominant traditional archival theory and practice is based upon colonial attitudes and presuppositions. Professor Maurice Wade explains, quote, "Whatever else coloniality might be, it's an epistemic enterprise that both sustains colonialism by dominating how colonized and formerly colonized peoples collectively understand themselves, their past, their present, their futures, and their aspirations." End quote. In relation to archives, we see this happening in many ways. First, the impetus to collect an archive is usually rooted in the possession of something valuable, in some cases the monetary value of the archive. It's focused on the archive as an object and not as a force for social change. Archives are generally purchased by institutions from other institutions or individuals, where often there is just a very transactional relationship. Archival collections are usually taken from the place where they were created, put in an archive that may or may not be accessible to the general public or to the community that created it, and then described not by people or the community that created them, but instead by the expert, so an archivist or a museum professional. And again, these individuals generally are not from the community where the archival object was created. Besides often leading to mistakes in the description of material or a lack of metadata or an imposition of an idea of what something is when it may not even be that thing, this practice also then makes that description part of the historical record. This prescribes to a culture or a community a history that may not be their own, but instead what someone else thought it was or should be. This takes away the agency of a person or community who created something, since they're prevented from speaking for themselves about themselves. It alters the lived sense of documents and objects by preventing those who created them from describing them. Besides violating the meaning of the objects or documents, and thus the historical record, this archival practice does violence to those that created the object or record by erasing or crossing out their perspectives, ideas, lived experience, and humanity. In addition, because the acquisition of the archive takes place through, in some cases, a very merely transactional relationship, archives and museums have then been relegated to an alleged neutral position. Much like museums, archives have been constrained by this myth of neutrality, making them very cautious to engage with ethical and social justice issues so that they do not appear biased. The archive is merely supposed to collect, preserve, and make accessible resources. This may seem neutral, but it's saturated with value-laden presuppositions that make neutrality impossible. Simply put, the presupposition that relegates the archive to the role of impartial custodian is impossible given the inherent preferring and placing of value that pervades archival practice, from what collections are acquired to how access is provided to what language is chosen to describe materials. This alleged neutrality restricts the scope and power of the archives and maintains the colonial attitude that privileges the possession and control of an object over personal relationships and partnerships. Post-custodial archival praxis brings about a transformation that allows the archive to live in the crossroads. To show how this way of collecting, preserving, and providing access to collections take place, I will draw on my experience with human rights-based post-custodial archiving at the Benson Latin American Collection at the University of Texas at Austin. The post-custodial theory of archives envisions that, quote, archivists will no longer physically acquire and maintain records, but will provide management oversight for records that will remain in the custody of the record creators, end quote. The post-custodial archival model departs from the traditional theory and practice of acquisition based on physical custody of records and recognizes that information is not always contingent on its original physical form. To implement this idea, the archive partners with organizations who are creating, or collecting archival materials, but perhaps lack the resources or technical expertise to ensure the preservation and access to their materials. Within the partnership, organizations maintain physical and intellectual custody over their materials while submitting digital copies to the archive for long-term preservation and access. The post-custodial model, as practiced by the Benson, is rooted in the establishment of deep collaborative relationships, horizontal and reciprocal in nature, with colleagues and sister institutions around the globe. In this post-custodial model, both archivists and partner organizations are experts, so there's not that hierarchy. Archivists share their professional expertise in preservation, description, and access in order to help develop the partner organization's preservation capacity and infrastructure. Partner organizations draw upon local labor for digitization work and harness their subject expertise to provide in-depth description of their materials. The resulting product serves the partner organization's programming, meets established standards for preservation, and serves as a valuable primary resource for teaching and research. Incorporating the partner organization into the archival process empowers and further invests in the local community in the preservation, and further invests the local community in the preservation of its cultural patrimony and helps ensure that the historical record remains intact. Both the archivist and the partner organizations are active participants in the collection, preservation, and access to the historical record, unlike in the previously described traditional ways of acquiring and preserving collections. So, in conclusion, in and through privileging the possession of physical materials, excluding the creators of the materials from playing an active role in their description and preservation, and often excluding poor and marginalized people from being represented in the archives, traditional archival theory and practice is colonial. It dominates how colonized and formerly colonized people collectively understand themselves, their past, their present, and their futures, and their aspirations. By developing archival theories and practices that do not privilege physical materials and involve the creators of the archival materials, allowing them to maintain both physical and intellectual custody and control over their stories, the archive ceases to dominate and instead allows those who may not usually be represented in the historical or scholarly discourse to speak for themselves and be represented in the historical record as they choose. This methodology allows collections to remain where they are created and used and where they support larger societal processes concerning transition, recuperation of historic memory, and reconciliation, all the while still meeting preservation and access goals. In addition, it frees the archive from being constrained by neutrality because post-custodial archival praxis is acutely aware of the transmission of values that takes place in and through archival praxis, affirming that it is impossible for an archive to be neutral. So I'm going to show you now how we have put, before I talk any more about Lloyd Best, I'm going to show you how we have, let me see, hopefully I can figure this out here. Close. Okay. Yes. Okay. I'm going to show you how we've put this post-custodial archival theory into practice. And so what we've done here, this is our JSTOR platform that we are using to host this collection. And as I mentioned, the post-custodial archiving makes sure that the creators of the historic material of the archive maintain both physical and intellectual control of the materials. So this archive is physically located in Trinidad and Tobago in the Lloyd Best Institute of the Caribbean. It has never left there. Carmel Best, who's Lloyd's daughter, Suniti Maharaj Best, who's Lloyd's widow, and a family friend, Saria Mohammed, are doing the digitization and the description of these materials. And I'll give you another example of why this sort of thing is important. So we started with the digitization of this publication, the Trinidad and Tobago Review. And just so you are aware too, this is Trinity's JSTOR platform, but this is open to the public. This is totally, anybody can access this. So if you have interest, please use this. It's what it's there for, and it's totally free and open. You can download it, you can save it, you can do whatever with it. But as we were going through organizing the different issues of the Trinidad and Tobago Review, there was a series that we think are maybe from around the 1980s, and they had no dates on them. But in the, here, let me see if this will, so you see the image here, right? I'll put it in full screen so you, here you see it says Sunday, July 1977. Well, in that space, it said guava season. And so me and the other archivists, we went on our phone and we looked and we said, but let's look and see, where is when is guava season? Oh, April to November. Okay, so surely this was published sometime April to November. And our colleagues were chuckling a little bit, and they said, guava season doesn't mean April to November. It's not a calendar date. Guava season means hard times. So had this been the sort of collection that had come to the Watkinson, where I was doing the description, it would be wrong. And we wouldn't have just misdescribed something, but we would be entering wrong information into an archive such that it changes the item itself. And this has happened many, many times in archives. And so what this post-custodial archiving tries to do is prevent those sorts of mistakes by making sure that the people that created the records are the same people that are describing the records, right? But just so you can see, Carmel and Saria have done all of the description for this. They've also done all of the digitization. We provided the equipment, and they did all of this. This one is in black and white because the issue is in black and white. The ones that are in color are in color. These are great scans, and you can see the care that they've taken in doing the metadata. The metadata is the description of well, in this case, the Trinidad and Tobago Review. But if you go here to item details, They have listed all of the creators, so all of the people that have published in here. They have the title, the alternate title, the date, and then here, this was really interesting. So metadata has different templates and different fields. So you can choose the sorts of things about the item that you want to describe. And in this case, we let our partners do that work. So who are we to prescribe how their things should be described? There's certain things, of course, that you need, titles and dates and things like that so that people can search it. But these were the subjects that they picked out. The culture was a term that they asked that we put in there. And you'll see Trinidadian, Tobagonian, Caribbean, West Indian, Trinidadian, and in some you'll see Trinbagonian. This one doesn't say Trinbagonian. But these were terms that we would not have known to include as well about the culture here. The contents, they've done extremely detailed table of contents for all of these, and then notable images and advertisements. In each one of these, this was a field that they requested as well, the advertisements. And this has proven to be huge for the way that the community in Trinidad and Tobago, and in particular in Tunapuna, they search this for the ads. So it's fascinating, but it's made this material more accessible to that community. So this is the work that we've done so far, and you can see the collection has, this is not the only thing. The Trinidad and Tobago Review is only a portion. We started with these because these get the highest use when they get requests from researchers and whatever. They're asking for these, and the Lloyd Best Institute holds the only full run of the Trinidad and Tobago Review. Lloyd Best published this. He and Suniti were the editors and published this. So they have the only full run, and it was getting a lot of requests, so we started with these. We were given by the Modern Endangered Archives program. It's a program that is funded by the Arcadia Foundation and is run through UCLA. We were awarded a grant, $50,000, to do just these Trinidad and Tobago Review, so that is another reason why we started with these. And then you can see that there are more than just the review. Sorry, I'm having trouble clicking. There you go. So photos. The Tapia was another publication of Lloyd Best's. He started a political party in Trinidad and Tobago called the Tapia House. And Tapia was digitized by the DLOC, the Digital Library of the Caribbean. The quality is not great, so once we do more work, we plan to go back and re-digitize Tapia. There's pamphlets, and then there's videos. This is Lloyd Best here, you can see in the video. And then there's also an entire archival collection that spans probably, I would guess between 12 to 20 archival record center boxes. They're like those paper banker box, so just imagine about 20 of those. Of these that you can see in this image here, these are all of the, this is the Tapia, can you see that? Yeah, okay. The Tapia newspapers, but this room has also archival material, so Lloyd Best's consultancy reports, correspondence, his manuscripts, published and unpublished, his conference presentations, published and unpublished, these sorts of things. And so those we are working, will likely be going back in March to help put those in order. and to then set a plan to digitize those items as well. But this is where you'll find it. In addition, this looks nice, and it's great because people can access it. But in addition to just making it available, when you do a project like this, especially when the materials are somewhat at risk, I mean, it's in a locked, secure place, but the climate in Trinidad and Tobago has been it's very hot, and it's been very wet. And so, floods, mold, they lost some correspondence in some of the archive in a fire many years ago. So we're lucky that there's still so much, and especially for, I work with Caribbean archives, and this one is one of the most extensive that I've encountered. A lot of them are somewhat fragmented, and you can see that if you look at the Digital Library of the Caribbean. So we're really lucky. We have this mass of things, and then we're digitizing it. It's not enough just to digitize it and put it on here. In addition to that, there requires long-term digital preservation. Digital files are more fragile in some ways than paper files. And so there is a really involved process where for each item that is digitized, we create, it's like a little package that we create to preserve digitally, and within that there's checksums that are generated that every 6 months we have to check to make sure that nothing has changed and that there's no bit rot happening or anything else. We save to the cloud, we save to local servers, we save to external hard drives. So we have things in many different places. There's the locks method, right? Lots of copies keep stuff safe. So we practice that, and then we also generate these checksums and things so we can go back and check. If a file is corrupted, well, then we have to delete it and switch it out with the other one. So that is kind of the process. The other thing that I want to mention, that I mentioned earlier, is that in many archival acquisitions, it's transactional. So, whatever institution says, hey, famous author or whoever, I'll give you this much for your papers. And they say, no, I want more. And then, there's a whole thing that goes on. But with post-custodial archiving, there isn't that kind of transaction, and it requires a real trust and a real relationship between the partners. And we are really lucky at Trinity in any kind of work that we do in special collections and archives and this sort of work. I feel like we stand on the shoulders of giants, right? And in this case, the personal relationships and the trust was built by our colleagues and our faculty and our students who were a part of the Trinity and Trinidad program for many years. Long before I came to Trinity, Trinity had a program, and that's how I became connected with the Lloyd Best Institute. And so that relationship building had already been done, and when we came in, we were okay. So it's if someone is thinking of engaging in this sort of work, it's different than just saying, "Oh, you got a cool archive. Can I come digitize it?" There needs to be that kind of trust, so that it can't be, when you're working closely with partners like this, it can't be merely a transactional relationship. So that is some of the work that we've been doing, and so the title of my talk was, a commitment to Caribbean culture and history, and this is how we're doing that. This is our commitment. So if anyone's interested, I could tell you a little bit more about Lloyd Best, but I think my time is pretty well up, so I'm open for questions if you like. Thank you. Yeah, okay, so Lloyd Best, he actually spoke at Trinity a while back, but he is a Caribbean man. He was an economist by training, and he spent his life trying to understand, develop, and integrate the Caribbean, and in particularly Trinidad and Tobago. So his thinking, writing, teaching, publishing, organizing, political activity were all devoted to what he called liberating the Caribbean imagination. And so he had this conviction that the Caribbean needed to find its own path towards a development, but defined on its own terms. So he thought the biggest challenge, besides anything else, was kind of a mindset of Caribbean people. And he thought that imagination, the Caribbean imagination, needs to be liberated. And so he thought after this devastation of the colonial experience that the psyche of the Caribbean people needed to be rebuilt. And he organized. He was a political organizer. He ran, I don't know if he ran for president or prime minister or something, but he had a political party called the Tapia House Movement. A tapia house is a special way that they build houses with a type of plaster in Trinidad and Tobago. And he thought that in its thinking and planning that Caribbean people should not fall into a trap of borrowed ideologies or borrowed solutions, so that they should not look at, oh, well, the U.S. is doing this, or, oh, this is doing this. No, they should forge ahead with their own ideas. So that led him to develop this plantation theory of economy and society, and that explains the modern Caribbean as a product of its unique history. So he developed from that this broad range of culturally relevant proposals for reforming just about every piece of Caribbean life. So education, economy, government, art, culture, science, sport, business, community, and family. He thought from this start is where we should go, and then we can make plans to reform. He also he worked as an economist and also a publisher, but he did a lot with the United Nations. He was also, for a time, a professor at the University of the West Indies in Trinidad and Tobago at the St. Augustine campus. It was in 1977 that he launched the Trinidad and Tobago Review. Let's see, I think those are all his major accomplishments. I'm sorry?
If you do have a question, let me just get the microphone to you so we don't lose our online audience. Okay?
Oh, okay. I appreciate it. Yeah. So my first question was, who is Lloyd Best?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And now, what was the time period that the material will be covering?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I can give you a range that we have right now, but as we start to process the collection, there could be things, maybe letters that he had from as a child or whatever. But right now, mainly from around the 60s through around 2010. So 2012. The Trinidad and Tobago Review was published until 2012, but Lloyd Best died in 2007. But there's been work that's been done kind of through some of the things that he started that kept going after he died, so those will be included, so it doesn't just end with him. And the Lloyd Best Institute as well has their own records that eventually will be included in this archive as well. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for that presentation, Christina. I have a question. Hartford has a very large Caribbean population, and I'm wondering if you find or perhaps foresee that that people would make use of this for particular reasons, maybe genealogy or other aspects of beyond scholarly interest.
Yeah, I think so. We launched this in March of last year, and we did it in Trinidad and Tobago. And this is where, and I would think, if there are people from Trinidad and Tobago here, I think this is where what they've done with the advertisements is really quite special, because the people there, when they were using the archive and looking at the things, they would search see if so-and-so's store is in there. And so they would search for that. And I could see something similar happening here too, right? You search for a landmark, or you search for, something that you remember, and see like, oh, is it in the news? Is it in that paper? Is it, did they write anything about that? Or people who had, the Tapia House was his first publication, the Tapia House newspaper. This was pretty exclusively just politics, maybe things a little bit about education reform or these things, but really very political. The Trinidad and Tobago Review, I think he says something to the effect of, and I will get the wording wrong, but basically it was to be, okay, we're not going to lose our focus on the political movement, but we're also going to include things that are uniquely Caribbean, like literature and art and music, and we're going to include pieces about that too. So I could definitely see people who had family members that were writers or musicians, or at that time, up through the 2000s even, using this to search, see if anything was published about them, or see if there were any ads for, I don't know, their costume store, or whatever it might be. But yeah, one thing that I hope to do, especially as this grows, because we have still a lot of work to do for this, but is to do some events where we, or even just taking over, postcards with the website or something to different groups in Hartford. I know there's the West Indian Social Club. And so just so they're aware that, because this is searchable on Google, and but you kind of have to know what you're looking for, so just to get the word out that there is this very unique resource.
This question is about searchability as well, which is, you mentioned the Digital Library of the Caribbean, which is a free, open, online access portal. Do you think that there would be value in duplicating for them these files, and how would that work?
Yeah, that's a great question. I reached out to them to see what might be feasible, and what they suggested is that they would link from their site to our site. That would be easier than them uploading all the, and their site has changed a little bit since I was more involved with it, where there are now not everything comes from DLOC, so they do link out to other repositories, and I think that's what maybe they were imagining here. JSTOR also publishes to the Digital Public Library of America, And so in addition to it being like this little local site here for us, if you were to search in the Digital Public Library of America, it should come up there too. But I'm hoping we can, if they don't want it now, when we finish, I'm hoping that DLOC will also link to, if they wanted all the images, we would be happy to share with them. And I'm pretty sure that we talked, Carmel spoke with them about replacing the Tapia publication images with new images that are more legible and that have been OCR'd so that they're searchable.
Should we all be worried about digital rot?
Yes.
It's a new term for me.
Bit rot, so if you look on your phone, like well, I can't show you this, but if you look, I have in my Google Photos, right, which I used to think was just totally, oh, well, it's saved, right? I have it here, it's in the Google Photos, it's there forever. Well, I look at photos from like 10 or 12 years ago, and some look a little fuzzy, like a little, almost like smoky looking, and then others have gotten lines up and down, and they have kind of a pinkish thing, pink and blue, and these colored lines down the middle. Part of the photo has gone away, like it's just black, or it's just not there, and that's bit rot. So this is why in doing a project like this, it's so important that this is not the only place that these images live. We have them saved in multiple spots. We have them backed up on a few cloud locations, and then we also run those checks to make sure that, they're doing okay.
Thanks again for that presentation, Christina. This question kind of goes from sort of lived experience back to methodology in a way.
Yeah.
So with the Lloyd Best Archive and other institutions that sort of sit in that very vulnerable band of the equatorial belt, and you already mentioned, some of the problems that they face with humidity and, desiccation and stuff like that, excessive heat. Has there been a change, or is there some thinking in terms of post-custodial practice about the possibility that some of these physical materials might need to be relocated?
Yeah. So the way, in this case, that we have, that the Lloyd Best Institute has approached this is to improve the conditions of where the things are stored right now. They put in a new cooling. So where the archive is kept is in this little room in an outbuilding, kind of in the backyard of Suniti and Carmel's house, and the room had an air conditioning unit in it, but it was rusted out and it didn't work, so it was just really hot in there. They fixed that and they put in a new thing. They put in a dehumidifier as well, and so that's how they've dealt with that. Despite all of the humidity and the floods and even some of the things that survived the fire, the stuff's in really good shape. It's miraculous, but there was no mold on anything that I saw. There were books that had gotten wet, but these are like easily replaceable, books from the 80s, 90s that are not rare. Those did have, and it wasn't even mold, they just had water damage. But I think that when we take the acid-free folders, and the one thing that they said was, instead of using the archival cardboard boxes, because cardboard can absorb moisture, we use plastic. The plastic, they're like the boxes, like the Record Center boxes, but they're plastic. So we did things like that. I don't know. I mean, I've worked on other projects where once the material was digitized, the originals were, not that they were discarded, but they were just kind of pushed aside, which is unfortunate, because if you can keep the original, you always want to keep the original. And then I've worked on other ones where they decided, well, we just don't have the proper storage for this. We're gonna, after it's digitized, we're gonna turn it to, like the National Archives or, some kind of state institution where they will have better conditions. The National Archives is in Trinidad and Tobago is very interesting. At our launch, the National Archivist spoke, and she said, we're really grateful that you all are doing this work, and that, that you have partnered with the Lloyd Best Institute, and that the Lloyd Best Institute is doing this work, because she said, my title is not National Archivist, my title is Government Archivist. And so our scope is government records, and these are not government records. So it's outside of our scope. We didn't take that. And this is, I think Carmel Best, who's now the director of the Lloyd Best Institute, sees a space for the Lloyd Best Institute in helping people to preserve things that are not government records, like this collection. And part of that will be some advising on, try to keep it in a cool place, try the certain things that will help paper in particular to live on. But yeah, that's a really good question. It's something, a lot of documents have been taken from places where it's, hot or whatever, because they say, oh, well, the document will survive better, in these conditions. But then, as I mentioned before, then the community that created it makes it very easy for them to lose touch with the document or whatever it might be, and then you're in that position where somebody like me that knows nothing about is doing the description, and the thing has been, it's not in a place where it can be a force for social change or for education or for anything. So it's a risk.
Hi, this is a lot of fun. One thing I'm curious about is how you, in this particular case, Lloyd Best, he's the guy who ran all this stuff. So in some ways, he's an obvious representative of the culture that you are looking at. But on the other hand, who says? I'm curious how you decide
Yeah.
who advises you on those searchable topics and things like that. And in this case, we're dealing with cultural material, which in some ways makes it kind of clear what you're trying to accomplish. In my case, I work on some cult-related stuff here, and there obviously is a cultural slice that can go through the material, but there's no obvious representative who can interpret the archive,
Right.
and determine what's important and what's not important. So I turn you loose on how do you do that, or how do you make those decisions?
Yeah, that's the pickle that archivists are often in, right? Especially when collections, are from a different time or a different culture, or, whatever, and you're looking at it and you're like, I don't know. I don't know what this is. I don't know. So generally what I do is I try to figure out, who wrote this? What was this a part of? Whatever it might be, and see if there's any way to reach out to the community or to the person that created the thing, if they're still alive, if it's, if you're processing things that are, really nobody knows, nobody's alive to, tell you. I think you do the best you can, and that's what we do. I always try, if I don't know, I try to get as close as I can to whoever created the thing. Sometimes it's a son or a daughter, or a cousin, whoever. But we face this all the time, and yeah, you just kind of do the best you can to try to figure out and ask the question. I always try to check, am I imposing something on this that is not what it is? Am I taking too much of what I think, and not kind of letting the item speak for itself, right? And then from there, reach out to whoever to see if they can help with the description. Does that answer your question? Or, yeah.
Well, you're in the neighborhood, but in the case of the mid-19th century, mid to late 19th century stuff that I'm, for better or worse, interested in, there are a lot of different angles. I just spent last weekend in a conference at the Center for Guns and Society at Wesleyan. People were talking about guns, history, current circumstances, etc. And if you collect some of the material that's available, and it's not that easy to find, the different people are going to look at that very differently.
Yep.
Not because of their ethnicity or or whatever, but it's part of it is their politics. Part of it is just what aspect they're interested in, things like that. The folks I was hearing from at that conference were from everywhere. They're both physically and or in terms of their orientation. For instance, we had a guy who's like a top shelf movie armorer. there talking about what his job is. It's fascinating, but his way of, what's that?
I don't know what that is. A movie armorer?
Well, it was in the news recently where an armorer, who is a person who manages weaponry that is on the movie set, but there was an example where one movie hired an amateur to do that, and it ended up with a gun that had a live round in it, and people got killed.
Yeah.
But that's just like, he was so far off the edge of what everybody else was talking about. It's fascinating, but very, very different. And I would assume that his take on some of the things that some other people were talking about would be very different from the orientation that they would come up with.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're pointing to a perspectivalism that exists, and that in some cases is a little bit inevitable. But as I said, this idea that you can say, let the archival item kind of speak for itself, and of course, somebody with a different perspective is going to hear different things from that item. At the same time, you can try to figure out, what it is, or what it was. And this is why I said I think it's really important when, say, processing an archival collection, to always question your own presuppositions. To see, okay, am I imposing my own opinion on this? Am I imposing my own thing on this material? And then, of course, do the proper research and whatever as well as you can,
I want to turn a little bit to sort of the longer history maybe of post-custodialism. It might be the case that there's examples from the 19th century or earlier of kind of what you're describing. I'm thinking specifically about sort of family historians, family archivists, folks who label the back of photos assiduously, community members who do that kind of cultivating of oral stories and so forth, and passing them down. So, in a sense, these things have acted and been operating on the periphery, you might say, of institutional archives, and come from more of a manuscript or family archives perspective. Would you say that's a possibility, that kind of deeper history of post-custodialism, and specifically in terms of creating metadata that's coming from a line of people? And you might say that the Lloyd Best Institute is a kind of family archive, and that if we think of this like that, then it doesn't seem so unusual, perhaps.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, another example even of post-custodial archiving is the monks that used to copy the different texts. So somebody in one monastery would write something, and the monks would go and copy it and take it to their monastery. And so this is another, it's post-custodial, and they had their little differences, right, and their little things, but it's the same text, but they would hand copy it and take it, and then another one would do the same. So, but same concept, right? That is not privileging, say, the thing as an object, right? Or that you have to have possession of that thing, that it was enough to have the copy.
We have time for one more.
Thank you. So to answer your question, reparations, then you don't have to take it anywhere. And I believe that there are historians that we can partner with who can help to provide context for the things that we're discovering.
Yeah.
And then to the Caribbean, this is a black man. Black history is only about 30 years old in the Caribbean.
Yep.
Let me say that again. Black history is only about 30 years old in the Caribbean. And so our population have very little information, affinity, interest in anything archival, up to and including government archivist. What that means is I got the job because I was the next in line. But I may have absolutely no interest in any of this. So there's a lot that, thank God for DLOC, but I do believe that we are beginning to wake up, and thank you for doing this project, because I'm a genealogist. I'm in original records all the time, and I know the value of preserving and digitizing. I'm from Barbados. We just lost a building, supposedly to lightning.
Oh, no.
A whole block of our archives went up in flames. Soon after we announced we were going to go public with heritage tourism, right? And when we announced that Colonel Drax, whose descendant is in Parliament and who still owns the oldest plantation on the island, we were in conversations about that property. So, you know, there's a lot going on, but I think it's important to have context. And we have black historians around, and I think who went to UWI, who may know this man, who can help to kind of shape the time, the period, the thought, et cetera.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks. That's...
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
So that brings us to the end of our time.
Okay.
And so let's thank our speaker, Dr. Bleyer.
Thank you.
And this brings to a conclusion the fall 2024 Hartford History Lecture Series. We've enjoyed putting this on, and we thank those who have come. I think Jack and Willie get the prize for attending everything. I don't know, did I miss anybody? So we've had wonderful audiences and people online, and also these live on, these presentations live on both at the Democracy Center here at the Old State House, the YouTube channel, and also at the Hartford Heritage Project at CT State Community College Capitol in our Hartford Heritage Project. So we see, every year we see those numbers growing of people watching the lectures. So they do have a life after that, and we thank CTN for doing this wonderful work to preserve all of this. And for our friends here at the Democracy Center, we're just so thankful for this place that we can present in, and we look forward to next year. Those of you who came and parked in the State House Square parking, you can have your parking validated at the information desk downstairs. And there's some refreshments outside, and also if you would fill out the feedback form that is out there to give us some information. It helps our sponsor, Connecticut Humanities, for us to be able to report to them what people have felt about the whole series. And also there's a place there where you can recommend topics or even speakers. So we would love to hear that if you have some ideas for next season and the season after that and the season after that. So thank you once again, and have a good night.